Hey, happy Tuesday. I'm Jeremy Nygaard. You see Seth Stowe's joining me live, and we are going to rock another episode of uh, Twins Hangouts. Seth, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Clearly, we are very prepared for tonight's show. I mean, I think both of us has put a lot of time, a lot of preparation into this podcast. So hopefully, people enjoy it. If you are listening to us live, please send us some questions. But it should be a lot of fun. Now, I got to ask you a quick question.
Okay.
I have a couple of quick questions for you before we go into the baseball thing. What are your thoughts on a little word association? What are your thoughts on icy water balloons?
Ouch. Now I
Do
got
you
to
want to
tell
dive
it to
into
you.
your story or no?
Well, yeah. So here's the deal. Um, the whole cold water challenge thing that went on this summer or this winter, excuse me. Um, I thought was ridiculous. Now I got that there were some good, reasons to do it, but the people that just did it to do it, I thought was ridiculous. So, long story short, I was nominated by a former student, and her mother is a coworker of mine. So when she told me that I was nominated, I said, "Well, I'm just not going to do it." Um, it just so happens that another coworker overheard the conversation, and she thought that on our last full day of school, which happened to be today, I should have let my students, and there's 45 of them in my classroom, the current configuration, I should let them all throw a water balloon at me, which I thought would be, you know, 45 water balloons. Kids are 9 and 10 years old. I probably get hit by 40% of them. 20 of those that 20% of them that hit me are going to be glancing and not get me wet. That was the whole plan. Um, it turned out though that they had a little bit different plans, and that if you buy water balloons in bulk, that you know the price per balloon is much cheaper. So, long story short, there were 500 water balloons wheeled up to our picnic track and field day today, um, and 200 third and fourth graders took aim, some from very, very close range, most water balloons at about 40 degrees, some with some ice chunks in them. And a minute and 30 seconds later, I was being destroyed, or for a minute and 30 seconds, I was being destroyed. Um, I tried to upload the video to Twitter. It didn't allow me to. I uploaded it to Facebook. So, Seth, you got to see it. You saw it shortly after it happened. Um, what were your what was your initial response?
My first thought was, the kids were pretty good for about the first 30, 45 seconds maybe at staying back where they were supposed to originally throw from. But I did notice as maybe their arms got more tired and they're young, so you want to protect their arms. I think you let them throw from about 3 feet away. And I think the percentage of hit was much higher at that point. And at that point, your degree of annoyance looked like it kind of went up a little bit, and I think I can understand that because those things hurt after a while. But I was pretty impressed that you hung in there and didn't like slap any kids or something.
I didn't slap any kids. It did turn out though that we had 3 torn UCLs. I don't know what happened. So we're gonna have a bunch of 9 and 10-year-olds undergoing Tommy John surgery because everybody gets it. So
Right.
the percentage is that 3 of them probably tore their UCLs. But no, I that happened approximately 7 hours ago. Um, I still have a pretty fair sized welt on my lower right side. Um, I realized you can tell in the video at about a minute and 10 seconds in, I think it was, where I realized I should probably turn my body because it was just I was getting pounded. It was like a boxer, it's body shot, body shot. So yeah, it was an interesting day. But you know what? I was pretty dry, and I can hear out of both my ears again after the one shot took me in the right ear. So I'm at about 95% health, I would say, right now for the Hangout. Unfortunately, my computer, the device that we normally do this whole deal from, is at about 0%. So we're dealing with that as well. But like I said in the write-up on Twins Daily, we're going to give day-to-day a new definition, and that means we're missing no time. So here we are with you on a wonderful Tuesday evening, and
Nice.
Twins are playing near Seth's home country, so we got
Yeah,
that going on as well.
that's right, eh? I mean, I think it's a good win for the organization here today. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you just got to play the games and put the chips where they fall, and but like I said, a good night for the organization when you can get hopefully what will amount to a win here as we're headed towards the ninth inning.
Absolutely. Where do you want to start? Should we start draft or should we start with the Cuban sensation Kendry Morales?
Let's start with Morales. I think he's the big opinion, or the big topic that kind of came up at the end of the draft, and obviously the reason that it came up at that time was very draft related, and I think then we jump into the draft from there. But on Twins Daily, we were pretty consistent about updating the website when the Twins made draft picks. You did a lot of that on Friday. I was doing it on Saturday, and all of a sudden I was on Twitter, and John Heyman made his announcement that the Twins and Kendrys Morales had agreed to terms, and there would be a signed contract coming very soon. Um, I almost had to do a double take. I guess what were your thoughts, Jeremy?
Well, it was interesting because we had been kind of texting back and forth about when we were gonna switch responsibilities, and you had sent a text about why don't you take round 20 something about I gotta write something about this Morales thing. So my initial response was Angel Morales must have done something. Maybe he hit for the cycle in a minor league game, or I was like, oh, because I think that was my response. I was like, what Morales thing? And then he didn't respond, so I started looking up some draft stuff, and then I was flipping through Twitter stuff, and I saw the same thing that you saw, and I think my response was, say what? And because it was totally out of left field, and it's fantastic, but it was not something that I expected to wake up and see. Obviously, I think it was probably not in the front of any of our minds, but maybe it had left the back of our minds that Morales could sign, starting basically Sunday, actually Saturday, maybe even Friday, without having any sort of compensation tied to him. So that deal was going to get done, but with the draft, in full swing, I don't think any of us were really thinking, oh, maybe Morales becomes a Twin this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean that was just it, and for so long I kind of said, well, let's just see what happens. Obviously, they're not going to give up the draft pick, and Terry Ryan was very upfront about it. He goes, yeah, we value those draft picks, and they do, and they should. Um, so it was really interesting. The timing is it was almost right away when the first few picks of um, it'd be the 10th round, or shortly into the third day of the draft is when Heyman made that initial announcement. And then obviously he saw that, and a bunch of people did some research after that. Soon you had Ken Rosenthal confirming it, and then all of a sudden you had others. I think it was Rhett Bollinger from TwinsBaseball.com that came up with the dollar value, and then people started doing the math of how much it really meant when it was prorated, and okay, when's he going to sign, and is he going to get that AAA minor league deal or be able to go to AAA for a week like Stephen Drew did? And I mean, to me, there were just so many things going through my head, like. But the big one was I'm just shocked. I mean, I'm rarely shocked, but this one to me came out of nowhere, and to me that's the story. And maybe we can touch on a couple of those subjects. You asked the question, and I thought it was a great question of why not sign him to a minor league deal so he could get a week or 10 days in the minor leagues? And I think to explain that, once they had an agreement on the financial terms of the deal, and it was a 1-year deal and all of that. You can do a minor league deal and just say, here's the value of that deal in the minors, here's that value of the deal in the majors, and kind of have a handshake idea that, okay, 1 week, that's it. That's all you're getting, 1 week, and you get called up and you get right back into those, same compensation numbers. There was a lot of talk about, he doesn't have any options, which is why he wasn't sent to AAA. But if you do the minor league deal, as you suggested, that kind of goes away. I mean, have you thought any more about that? Do you think it was just that maybe other teams were offering the major league deal and the Twins weren't able to convince them that they would actually call him up in a week?
Well, you know, the whole thing is, to me, the minor league deal just made a ton of sense. last night post game, Rhett Ballinger and I had a very brief Twitter conversation that actually centered around Gardy's post game comments about bloggers. Um, but then I asked him, I said, what's the deal with Morales? Why wasn't he signed to a minor league deal? And he said, from what I can understand, um, they didn't, and I don't know what side, if this was the Twin side or the Boris side, what they didn't want to deal with the potential of Morales getting hurt during that time. So whether that was, a week in the minors if he gets hurt, um, there was that possibility that I think maybe could have been a sticking point during negotiations. Um, as we've seen now, Morales needed basically one day. So if it was going to be a week, I don't know, Seth, did you watch was it the Sunday broadcast where they talked to Terry Ryan? Did you watch that interview about Morales?
I did. I did.
So after hearing what Terry Ryan said, were you under the impression that Morales sitting on the bench was going to be more of a 5 to 7 day thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And to me, that was my biggest question was, okay, he's been taking and he's been hitting against some former major leaguers in live BP, and now he's going to come here and sit on the bench and take batting practice and maybe hit in the cage and somehow be game ready by sitting on the bench. My thought all along was the only way to get at bats is to get at bats, and I tweeted that a couple of times, which kind of sounds silly, but I mean, it's the truth. The only way for him to get live at bats is to get in the lineup and to play in games and in game situations. So I never really understood how they were going to get him game ready by sitting on the bench for 5 or 7 days.
And obviously they weren't. And
right.
That's why he played, the second day. Now, I believe he went 1 for 3
with a walk.
Was Monday his first game then? Yesterday?
Yep. Against R.A. Dickey.
And then yesterday, or tonight's game, he has an infield hit, I understand.
Yeah.
And
a double.
Oh, he does. See, I haven't watched any. I hadn't seen any of tonight's game, but so
Yep.
would you say he's a pretty good hitter then, huh?
He's a terrific hitter. Always has been. And there's those guys like that you just don't need a lot of time to get ready, and Morales is probably that guy. I mean, again, he's been going against former major leaguers this whole time. He's working 7, 8, 9 hours a day, staying in decent shape. I mean, there's no reason to believe that this is really just his spring training. Maybe it helped to get a couple of bats against a guy like R.A. Dickey where you're not fastball conscious, just to kind of focus in a little bit. But his first hit yesterday, or on Monday night, came against a prototypical pitcher, hard thrower type. And today he's seen, pretty decent pitching. The double he hit was a shot to the gap. The second baseman was playing that shift where he plays out at rover, basically. And he hit it over him and between the center and right fielder. And, he's not fast. And he's never going to be fast. So that's not necessarily part of his game anyway. So, yeah, I mean, he can hit, no question.
Now, we can get into this later, I think, was kind of the plan. But where do you see him when he gets up to full strength? And maybe that's where he is right now. But where do you see him settling into this lineup?
I think you could put him anywhere from, 4th or 5th, maybe 6th on occasion. I look at it like this right now. My idea or ideal lineup would be, probably Danny Santana in center field and leading off. Brian Dozier hitting second at second base. Joe Mauer still at first base, regardless of what a lot of people probably think or want. And then you could have, I think, Willingham hitting 4th as long as he's hitting well. I'd put Morales 5th and Arcia 6th with Plouffe 7th. And you could flip-flop 4 through 7 on any given day. If you really feel like you'd like to see Arcia get potentially a couple more pitches, you have Morales hit behind him or have Willingham hit behind him. And, I mean, Plouffe's still, I think, leading the league in doubles, and he's, he could potentially be your 7-hitter. And then you've got your catcher, be that Pinto or Suzuki, more likely Suzuki hitting 8th. and Escobar hitting ninth, and he's been generally really good. To me, that's a lineup that you can get hits 1 through 9, and that's pretty exciting.
So you're not gonna buy into to it yet that maybe Mauer shouldn't bat third.
Not yet. I mean, I've read that, I've heard that, I've been asked that, but what good is it going to be to move him down in the lineup? That's not going to take pressure off for whatever people want to say. If you move him, it's going to create more talk, and then you're going to suddenly hear, "Oh, your $23 million man is hitting seventh," or something like that.
But
I mean,
regardless of where he's batting, there's always going to be talk. There's always
yep.
going to be questions about what he's doing. At this point, we know what he's doing. What's the difference between batting him third and batting him sixth or seventh? Not seventh. I would have no issue if Gardy decided to fill out his lineup tomorrow, and if he bats Dozier third and bats Mauer potentially sixth. I would have no issue with that at all. But I don't think that's going to happen. At some point, if the Twins are serious about competing, which they made the first step to doing by signing Morales, then they need to make a serious move and say, I don't think the first move is Mauer. I think the first move might have to do with their rotation, but the second move then has to be we need to get our lineup in the best position it can be to win ball games. And at this point, having Joe Mauer bat third isn't the best thing for the team to win ball games.
Maybe, but we also know that it could shift at any time. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't overreact to 2 months. It's bad. I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that he's hitting well by any means. We're not. But I mean, he is a 10-year guy who has done it over and over and over again. I'm not willing to move him at this point. I mean, you move him to 2, fine. You move him to 3, fine. I mean, I just don't see the value in sending him to just a 7. I don't know what that's going to do. That's going to get him less at bats, and what he needs is more at bats to get something figured out.
So why not flip-flop him and Dozier? Is that terrible?
No, I mean, I'd be fine with that. I mean, you're moving your best hitter to number 3. I don't have a problem with that. A lot of people will say you want your best hitter statistically to bat second, so I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with them leaving him there. The key is he continuing to take good at bats, and is the process correct? And I don't know that anything's really changed in his process, and his process has worked for 15 or 11 or 10 years. As long as he doesn't start fiddling with his mechanics and fiddling with his approach, he's going to break out of it at some point.
Do you
In
think
theory.
do you think that his struggles this year have anything or nothing or maybe a little to do with last year's concussion?
I think that is an under talked about possibility. I mean, the reality, and Parker Hageman on Twitter posted it as well. He posted the first, I think, 54 or 60 or whatever it was games post-concussion of Mauer, which I think he had like a 665 OPS, to the first 54 or 60, the same number of games when Justin Morneau first came back from his concussion, and his was like 606 or something. So I think, I mean, I'm not saying that's what it is. It could just be people shifting him like we talked about last week. It could be something different. Could be a vision kind of thing. We don't know. But I think it'd be unfair to completely say that the concussion doesn't have some sort of an effect, and I don't know what that is. I mean, none of us know enough about that to say what it could be, but we are talking about a brain injury, and it does affect motor skills, or it could, and that hand-eye coordination, which has been his thing for so long. But at the same time, he is hitting the ball to the places he's always hit the ball to, and maybe not quite with as much authority, but he's still. I mean, so much is the same. It's just a matter of they're not falling in for hits that I'm not willing to say for sure what it is.
It's more than just bad luck at this point.
Of course.
The strikeouts to me are what's the most alarming part of it. Um, may some of it have to do with the mental the mental part of going from being involved in every pitch as a catcher to being a guy that just stands at first base. I mean, obviously you're involved, but you're not nearly as involved in that. Do you think that could be another? I mean, obviously there's many variables here, but could that be a variable that has traction, or is that just probably not?
I'm trying to be like nice, but I don't think so. I mean, I think that's just kind of people thought that by him moving to first base, he would suddenly become stronger, and he'll certainly be able to play more games in doing so, as long as he stays healthy and there's nothing recurring or something like that. He'll play more games. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to put up better numbers. But I don't. I mean, I don't. I don't know. I mean, when you're catching, you have to be so focused pitch to pitch, and when you're at first base, you can kind of do a little bit of thinking between pitches about not about the next pitch and things like that. So I guess I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I think people are just kind of grasping for straws of what's going on. In reality, it's just essentially an 8-week slump. I mean, that's people have those. It's just Joe Mauer doesn't have those.
Right. And that's, I think, I mean, this is getting far worse before it's getting any better, and I think that's a scary part. The talk I guess that you always see, or that I always see, is he's making $23 million deal, and I guess the thing that I've said, and I think I maybe made the comment on the very first hangout we ever did, was you don't pay a guy for what he's going to do, you pay a guy for what he's done.
Right.
And when he signed that contract, he was a $23 million a year guy.
And he was every year until last year, and including last year.
Right. So for me, a lot of those contracts, you're paid on what you've done. You've earned it. The better you are, the more elite you are, the longer you're going to earn that. And so for me, yeah, it's frustrating that we're at that point, but I'm not going to feel like, oh my gosh, he's making $23 million a year. Do you think there's anybody out there that really thought for the life of this contract that he was going to be worth every penny of it?
I think there are, and I don't get that thought. I mean, there's a reason St. Louis didn't sign Albert Pujols to the money that he thought they should. Obviously with the Twins in Minnesota, the Twins didn't have the same luxury that St. Louis did. I mean, Mauer's from here. They had a new stadium. There were so many reasons that they had to sign him. But if anyone thought that he was going to be worth $23 million until he was 36 or 30, whatever it was, I mean, you're kidding yourself. And I can honestly say that I've never worried about the money. I don't get why people do it. And I want to give a little credit here to Jake Nyberg on Twitter, because he posted something that I thought was really good and kind of expressed better what I've been trying to say or what I've been thinking and probably not saying. But he wrote this on Twitter: Mauer has struggled in 2014, mightily, perhaps inexplicably, but the money argument is weak, lazy, and just sounds like weird jealousy. I mean, and to me that sums it up. I guess that was end quote. But a lot of people disagree. I mean, a lot of people say, but it is about the money, or even if it's not about the money, he has been awful. And it's like the money keeps coming up, and it's just I don't get it. I mean, maybe I'm weird that I don't think about that kind of stuff, and it's like I don't think that's affected anything, their ability to do whatever, and they needed to do it and all that kind of stuff. But it does. It just sounds like jealousy. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Right, and I mean, I think it's an easy leg to stand on, and like you mentioned, the Twins were in between a rock and a hard place when it came to re-signing him. You either had to do it, or you were too cheap to do it, and it just so happened it came on the heels of an MVP season where he started to show power, and when he really was just putting him into the first row and left field of the Metrodome. But it, you absolutely had to do it, and he earned it. And now I think it's time to move on. So,
He
uh,
earned one. He earned it. Two, the Twins offered it to him. So of course, why would you say no? Three, if he would have been allowed to become a free agent next year, I still think he would have wanted to stay in Minnesota, and I think he would have for probably a lot more money than that. And because the Red Sox didn't have a catcher at the time, the Yankees didn't have a catcher at the time. I mean, I think Jason Varitek was just going to retire. The Yankees didn't have a catcher. I don't know, it was the Mets or Dodgers or someone else didn't have a catcher. I mean, I'm obviously trying to remember back 3 or 4 years, but um, I mean, it would have been a lot more, and it's not justification. I still think it was the right decision at the time. I wrote at the time, and I'd like to look back at my archives, that I mean, I can remember it. I can still see it on the computer, but I wrote something to the effect that I'm kind of just glad to know that it's done. I'm glad to know that he's going to be here for those years, and But if people think that it's ever going to make baseball sense to sign that long of a contract at those kind of monies, I mean, they're kidding themselves. And at the time, most people were really happy. So I mean, a lot of people are disappointed because this has been a bad 2 months. But like you said, and I think you said it well, what were they expecting? That he was just going to be good the entire time? We are talking about, he did play catcher for 10 major league seasons. He did have the concussion, and we know the history of catchers once they hit age 30. It
right.
isn't good. And even though he's played first base this year, it doesn't erase what he did for 10 or 11 years, or really his whole life before that. So yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating, and I don't know why it's this big of a precipitous drop. I again still do expect at some point he's going to go on a tear, and we'll be like, why were we so worried? But at this point, he's hitting 254. Slugging percentage is like 325. I don't know what his OPS is, probably about 670 or something. That's not Joe Mauer. And you hope it's nothing too serious. If he's healthy, I just feel. I was about to say that he's going to hit just fine. And you just feel like he's going to hit at some point here.
Um, could this be? I mean, obviously he missed some time earlier this season with a back deal. It seems like he's been on a slump ever since he returned from a
Yeah.
back. Do you think that this could be uh, a bigger deal than just some back spasms? Could this be an ongoing issue? Could there be a back deal that we're dealing with?
That's a fair question, right along with the concussion question. Um, he was hitting the ball well. In fact, before that injury, I think he was just up to 296 or 297 or something like that. And I think, was just kind of getting, I think his on base percentage was 380 at the time. So maybe there is something to that. Maybe. We hope not. But I guess we'll find out more.
Or we won't find out more.
Or we won't. Yeah, who knows? I
Right.
do have a question on Twitter from, and I'm not sure if he's listening. Hopefully he is. And I'm probably mispronouncing Levi. Uh, I just won't even pronounce the last, or say the last name just in case he wants to maintain anonymity. But it asks the question: can Joe Mauer renegotiate his contract like football players? Not that he would, but just wondering about baseball contracts. Jeremy, I know. I mean, go ahead and answer that one.
Well, the Players Association plays a pretty big role in all those contracts, and if you have a guy agree to a deal that even the Singleton deal I know was getting some heat from the Players Association. Um, when Mauer signed his deal originally, there was some talk that the Players Association would be unhappy with that deal because it almost appeared that he gave the Twins a hometown discount. Uh, in the world of baseball, you won't ever see a renegotiated deal uh, because they're guaranteed deals. And the reason that guys renegotiate deals in the NFL is because they're not guaranteed. And if I'm paying Seth $5 million to be my quarterback, and all of a sudden he has a bad year, he could hit the open market if I cut him, and not make $5 million, or he could renegotiate a deal with me to to stay in the system that he's in and still get that opportunity that he's getting for $2.5 million. So uh, I would say, while I don't think it would be illegal, I don't think it would break any baseball rules to renegotiate a deal like that. Uh, there would be some serious ramifications as far as the baseball union and how the player association, how his contract, how his agent would be dealt with. Very Jerry Maguire-ish we're dealing with now. Um, there's just a whole lot to it now. Um, there's no options in that deal. Everything is done. Um, the likelihood of his agent coming up and saying, Joe hasn't performed his contract, so we want to, help you out. That's a 0% chance that that's ever going to happen.
And it shouldn't. I mean, the Players Association is strong. It should back the contracts that people sign. I mean, I think if I'm not doing my job at you know, well, I guess I don't have a contract like that, but I mean, if I'm not doing my job, you expect to still get what you were promised, so especially if it's signed. That's a poor example because, I would just stop all over again. But if you sign a contract that has these years and these terms and these dollars, it's signed. It's good. It's the way it should be. And, it's kind of like the Yankees with the Alex Rodriguez thing. I mean, they're trying to get Major League Baseball to get them out of spending, all the money that they still owe Alex Rodriguez. Well, you know what? They deserve some accountability for signing that deal too, just like the Twins front office deserves the accountability for signing the Mauer contract. And I mean, we've talked probably too long about this already because it is the top. It's one of the topics right now, is Joe Mauer's performance. But I mean, he earned the money. I mean, I think we both are in agreement on that. He's earned the money. He's earned that contract. He signed the contract. The Twins signed the contract. It is what it is.
Right. My the second computer I'm using tonight is very slow, but I did want to look because I know Baseball Reference does like a thing each year where it's like their salary versus their what they technically earned. So I would like to just compare those numbers, but right now I'm waiting for that computer to load. Um, let's move on. Let's move back to Kendry Morales, because I mean that's where where this topic started before it took the Joe Mauer turn. Um, he signs a 1-year deal, prorated. So I think is he getting like $7.6 million? Um, is that what it is? I could look on my
Yeah,
sheet, but is that
yeah,
what you're
it's
thinking?
7.6.
So he's not getting what he would have got, and while I'm fine with that, I think now it begs the question: what happens? One of the first things I read after he signed was something along the lines of, "Great, now the Twins actually have a trade chip the end of July," and I had a hard time wrapping my head around that idea. Um, but obviously, that's one of the things that could come into play. Um, the second thing I didn't that came up was, oh, it's a 1-year deal. My first instinct was, well, it shouldn't just be a 1-year deal. But then, as I read more, I guess it made sense. So my question, Seth, is how long is Kendry Morales going to be a Minnesota Twin?
Well, I mean, I think all year. Um, Obviously, the shortest term would be about 6 weeks if he gets traded at the end of July. And my initial thought to hearing that, well, good, they have a trade chip type of a conversation, is that's just a weird way to think of it. I mean, I get that some may be cynical and think that the Twins are crazy for thinking they're in it and all that kind of stuff, but at least on the day or the week that he signed the contract, just at least play along for then and be like, okay, yeah, this is good. Let's see what happens, type of thing. But you know what? You start realizing July 31st is like 7 weeks away or 6 weeks away, and if they're going to deal him, it's going to be at that time because he's not going to clear waivers in August. So unless they trade him to just that team that claimed him, but I think he's with them the whole year. I think he'll put up some numbers, and I think that they'll just see where it plays out at the end of the year. I don't know. I'm not ready to just sit there and say, hey, it's going to be a. I mean, they're 3 games behind 500. They're 4.5 games back in the division title, but they're probably within just a hand, 2 or 3 or 4 games of the wild card. Let's see how it plays out for the next 6 weeks. I think, in my opinion, very easily he could be traded to a team that needs a
So
DH, but those guys aren't guys that people go after.
those of you that listened to Seth about a year ago, we had done a draft
Uh-oh.
special-ish podcast, and it was at that time that Seth kind of introduced himself to the world of conspiracies, um,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a Scott Boras related conspiracy about getting Mark Appel to the Astros, and turned out the convoluted idea actually turned out to be true. So I give Seth credit for that. But Seth, my question is, are you into the conspiracy that maybe Scott Boras um, delivered Kendry Morales to the Twins as an apology for Mike Pelfrey?
I tweeted that actually, and then when I wrote the article at Twins Daily, I put that in there as a sorry about that type of deal. But I have a sense that Scott Boras isn't really the type that just gives players away to the team that he likes the best. That said, I do think that the Twins have a pretty good relationship with Scott Boras. People don't want to hear that. They don't think that. But the Twins certainly have not had any issue acquiring players that are Scott Boras clients. I mean, they've signed Mike Pelfrey. Jeff Manship was a Boras guy. I'm trying to think back. Going back to Kenny Rogers, he signed with the Twins at one point. Alex Myers, a Boras guy.
Chris
I
Parker.
mean, yeah, I mean, there's names out there. I actually think that the Twins might have a decent relationship with Boras. No, they're not going to go out and just hand money to him. On the guys like Jacoby Ellsbury or the big names, and I'm totally fine with that. That's the other thing. I hear a lot of people talking about how it's so dumb to give Mauer the money and the big contracts and things like that. Yet those are the same people that continue to bash the Twins for not playing in the big free agent market, which that's what all of those guys do. How many of those guys make it more than about 2 or 3 years? I mean, how would you like to have Teixeira and Alex Rodriguez and guys like that right now. So I just went in a few different directions, but basically my statement was, I think the Twins are okay with dealing with Scott Boras.
And that you're still into conspiracies, just not this particular one.
That's right.
I found my information here. Joe Mauer, um, it does. This is on Fangraphs and value-wise, his value in his MVP season, which was 2009, he was worth 34.4 million. 2010, he was worth 21.1. In 2011, which he spent, injured, he was worth 6.2. Came back and was worth 21.3 and 26 million his previous 2 seasons. And that includes a very injury-shortened 2013. So far this year, his wins above replacement on Fangraphs is zero point 0.1, and his current dollar value is $800,000. So,
Right.
um, he made way over what he was paid for a great majority of his deal. Um, but this is by far, I mean, his rookie season, which he only played like a month, right? He was still worth like 3.5 million. So this is definitely an outlier. But you know, what are you gonna do?
It is. I mean, the other thing is, even if he has a bad year, he can come back next year with a really good year. I mean, you don't know. We don't know. I mean, we don't know the entire picture, so we'll see what happens. I mean, we've already spent way too much time on it, so I know that people like hearing it because it just makes them mad, but we'll see.
One last point: the updated Zips and updated Steamer rankings from whenever they are have him somewhere around 2 wins above replacement, which would still be about half of what his salary would be. If you figure each one win above replacement is worth $6 million, or approximately. He should be at least a 4-win above replacement player, which shouldn't be crazy based on who he has been, but this year just not what he is. So, are we cool with leaving Morales alone, leaving Mauer alone? There's plenty of other things we can talk about. What direction would you like to go from here, Mr. Seth?
I'd like to do this. I'd like to just, I made a tweet before the Twins game saying that, my prediction for when Trevor May would make his first start with the Twins was Sunday, or whenever Kevin Correa made his next scheduled start. And in doing so, I think what I did is jinx things enough where even though he's going against Toronto, Kevin Correa threw 6 shutout innings tonight in Toronto, which obviously gives him at least another start. And Trevor May down in Rochester went 5 1/3 and gave up 3 runs on 6 hits and 3 walks, striking out 4. He gave up a home run, jumping his ERA all the way up to 2.98. So obviously he's still pitching well, but of course the irony is tonight we all thought maybe this was the end of Correa, and he goes out and pitches well, and Trevor May struggles a little bit for the first time. But I was thinking, Jeremy, kind of if we could tie in some of the minor league talk and the promotions and things like that, and then get back to the Twins. But I also think we do want to spend some time later in the show just to give those that are listening a preview. We are going to talk more about the draft. We did have the podcast, the special podcast, on the night of the first round of the draft. We were also on the K-Fan show, which you can also get on iTunes as well. And that show concluded right before the Twins selected their second-round pick, which was Nick Burdi, who they had previously drafted, but he's the closer for Louisville, who's playing in the College World Series. I want to talk more about the draft and Nick Gordon and all of these guys a little bit later, but I thought maybe transitioning to the minors might be a good timeline.
Hey, I'm fine with that. If you haven't looked yesterday, I posted the minor league recap, and it was called One Run. All the affiliates lost by 1 run. A couple good games. Tyler Grimes had a 4-hit game, and Chris Johnson pitched a pretty phenomenal game and a loss. Also Cole Stewart. There's a bunch of Cole Stewart information there. So if you haven't been on there to see Monday's recap, you should probably check that out. Also, if you are joining us and can't hang out all night, absolutely try to get us off iTunes. It's going to be a little bit different because my whole system is set up and now it's kind of gone. So I'm going to try something new this evening. Bear with me if it's not up. But the goal would be to have it up sometime tomorrow morning. So with that, Seth, where do you want to start with the minor leagues?
I think for us, and as we're related kind of to Twins Day, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start with the news that came late last week, and that is that the guy that's been on our show or been on our podcast, been a contributor at Twins Daily quite a bit the last couple of years, AJ Pettersson has made the decision to retire from pro ball. Came out, I think, last Thursday night after the Miracle game that that Eddie Rosario was moving back up to Double-A from Fort Myers, and then AJ was going to head back down to Fort Myers. Made the decision that was best for him, best for his family, best for he and his wife, best for everything for him just to retire. And he wrote a very nice column for Twins Daily that was posted on Saturday, I believe. Yeah, it was Saturday afternoon as well, called Moving On, and kind of talks a little bit about that. And he thanked a few people, but I think he's been such a great guest for us. But for me, I consider the guy a friend. We've had a lot of conversations during the season, after the seasons, things like that. You get to kind of know a guy, and you just you're better off for knowing him. You get to learn a little bit about how these guys think. Not that everyone thinks the same, but you start getting some of those different perspectives on things, and it was just great. And he's going to continue, I hope, to write at Twins Daily. But now he's kind of ready to move on to the next chapter of his life. And as much as we tout the minor leagues and we talk about the guys that aren't quote unquote prospects, and AJ always understood that he was never a quote unquote prospect. Part of the minor league journey for probably 90% of minor leaguers, if not more, is it ends before you get to the big leagues, and it's probably a sad part. But it sounded like in talking to him, it was something he was ready and very at peace with. So, I want to personally wish him well. In public, I guess I already have previously, but I think that Twins Daily readers who have read that, or those others maybe on Twitter, have done a good job of just appreciating what he has meant to the Twins minor league and Twins community in general, just by being such a people person. And I'll kind of get off my little rant here, but we do appreciate what AJ has meant to us, and I know to the Twins community at Twins Daily and other places, and certainly wish him the best.
Yeah, and AJ's never been, especially when we've had him on here, or the times that he's written, he's always very honest, and it was, he had kind of alluded before that he would play until it wasn't fun, and when he started writing some of his more recent articles about, it was almost like finding fun in things. You could just tell that it was different. Obviously, he went through his wrist thing, the ups and the downs of last year, and his article was fantastic. And I don't know AJ nearly as well as you do, but he's just a good dude, and I look forward to kind of following his story from here on, because I think there's still a lot of big things that he's going to do. Maybe with baseball. The thing about him though is just you can get that sense that maybe not baseball, and I think he'd be completely fine. So I hope he continues to write at Twins Daily, because he offered a side of things that we would never get otherwise, and it was neat, and he got to play with the best prospects and had input on those guys, and I think he seemed pretty well respected by everybody. He was a good locker room guy, I bet. So the Twins value those type of players. I would hope that the Twins recognize that, and see if he'll stick around, and I kind of doubt that would be what he wants to do, but I think he'd be good at that.
Yeah, and we'll, if he's willing, we'll have him on maybe once in a while and see what that next step is. I have a feeling he'll be around, so we're not just gonna lose the guy. So we'll keep in touch, and as he allows or as he wants to, keep you updated on how he's doing. But again, we just wanted to kind of wish him well. Jeremy, what I was thinking is, kind of going on. I think the Rochester game is still going. What do you think of us starting in Cedar Rapids and kind of giving a quick update on what's going on tonight, kind of a few of the highlights from the week, and then talk about a couple of guys that I think with the All-Star game coming up in a little over a week, guys who could move up to Fort Myers at this point, or who are candidates to potentially move up. So I guess with that, what I'd like to do is just say that Cedar Rapids lost tonight 6-2 to Quad Cities. Aaron Slagers had another rough start. 5 runs, 3 of them earned on 7 hits in just 4 1/3 innings, walked 1, struck out 3. Josue Montanez came in, gave up only an unearned run on 2 hits in 2 2/3 innings, but he struck out 6. And then Chris Mazza came in, he struck out 2 in 2 scoreless innings. Not a lot of offense for the Colonels. Chad Christensen was 2 for 4. Tanner Bobra was 2 for 4, and that was kind of your highlights from Cedar Rapids. Now, if we were to talk about some of the better players there this first half, as in guys who we think could move up, 2 names, actually 3 names in my mind come to my mind, and they're 3 guys for a couple of reasons. One, they're performing pretty well at this level, but secondly, they are in that age category where if they're performing pretty well, and you could potentially having guys coming up from short season or draft guys some of those guys are the guys you kind of look to. And to me, Mitch Garver hitting 299 with a 396 on base percentage, 14 doubles, 7 home runs. That's a guy I think could potentially move up if there was a spot. Chad Christensen is a utility guy from the University of Nebraska from last year's draft as well. He's hitting 295, getting on base 35% of the time, 11 doubles, 2 triples, 5 home runs, and he is 17 for 20 in stolen base attempts while playing all 3 outfield positions and both corner infield positions. And then Jason Kanzler started the season in extended spring training, but when Zach Granite got hurt just in the 4th game of the season, Kanzler came up. He's hitting 293, on base 34% of the time, 5 doubles, 5 triples, 5 home runs. He's got 10 stolen bases. And what people talk about with Jason Kanzler, another draft pick from last year, is his defense in center field. He won a couple of Gold Gloves while at the University of Buffalo. So to me, those are 3 guys that I think have kind of done the job. And if needed, or if there's other promotions, those are 3 guys that I think would be at the top of the list to potentially move up as far as the offense goes. Anyone you'd think of, Jeremy?
I don't know that I would add anybody to that list. Brian Haar has been decent for them. And I think what you did is you mentioned maybe the 4 oldest players or the 3 oldest players on the team. And I probably mentioned the 4th one. I think Tanner Vavra
Right.
is on there too. But I don't look at any of those guys and think, oh, they can do. They're not going to start in Fort Myers. At this point, like you mentioned, the Cedar Rapids offense didn't do much. Well, that's not rare. That's not that's a nightly occurrence. So personally, I don't know that I would move any of these guys up. I might be more likely to when some of those short season guys and some of those rookies sign, I might be more likely to swap them. Send some of these guys back to E-Town, and not necessarily the guys that you named. I think those are guys that deserve to stay in Cedar Rapids. But we knew that coming in that this offense wasn't going to be phenomenal, and I don't know at this point Mitch Garver, I think he could legitimately move up. I don't see Christensen moving up. I think being a Cedar Rapids guy, it just makes too much sense to leave him there in the first place. And Kanzler, he, like you said, he's got some defense, but moving to Fort Myers where there's just a lot of outfielders on the disabled list, who's he gonna play over? So
well, let me say this. Let me say this just to kind of continue that. Now, Chad Christensen is the local guy, and I've mentioned many times that I'm not concerned at all about age. When you're talking about a guy that's probably not a top prospect, who his role, should he ever get to the big leagues, will be his utility role, where he's able to play 5 positions, hit, steal a few bases, play decent defense at various places. So I'm not worried about him sticking there for the whole year. I think with Mitch Garver, my thought is, Alex Swim is just kind of hanging out on the bench in Fort Myers right now. And, he could have a situation where you have Stuart Turner and Mitch Garver splitting time at catcher in Fort Myers, and obviously Turner's the bigger prospect, but Garver certainly made a name for himself, and kind of deserves an opportunity there. Alex Swim could come back down to Cedar Rapids and get an opportunity. Swim being a late round pick last year, who's been at extended spring, but when they needed a catcher, when they needed another player in Fort Myers, he just went over there from extended spring. He could get an opportunity to actually play a lot for Cedar Rapids. As it relates to Kanzler, I think the comment there is, as nice as Tyler Grimes' game was the other night with 4 hits, he's not a center fielder. And, obviously Buxton will come back at some point. J.D. Williams might come back, although he's not a great fielder either. Kanzler could absolutely play center field right now for Fort Myers, and that would be a great defensive improvement. Because I think last I talked to Zach Granite, he sounded like he was getting into some extended spring games here, and he could be back up in Cedar Rapids shortly.
Right. I think, though, Kepler is going to play center when he's back, and I guess I don't know how long he's going to be out. But
That's a good.
I would see him staying there quicker than, because otherwise you move Kanzler up, and then Kepler comes back, and then what? You move Kanzler back down. I, I think that the roster as it looks right now in Fort Myers isn't real open to let's just bring some guys up unless guys get hurt. And right now they've got 4 guys on the DL.
Right.
Including Levi Michael, who was playing really well at the beginning of the year. Um, Lance Ray just got healthy. This is his 3rd year in Fort Myers, so maybe he's a guy that if they want to give an opportunity at New Britain, that they can move him up. But I just don't. I look at that Fort Myers roster and don't look at a lot of opportunity for guys to really move up unless the Fort Myers guys move up. And with those guys being as good of prospects as they are, I don't want to see those guys rushed. And as good as even Polanco's been offensively, we're not going to see him moved up to New Britain, anytime soon. They're going to continue to play him at shortstop. Is there anybody that's totally outplayed this level? No, there's not. And if Vargas gets a promotion, then maybe Gonzalez gets a promotion on his heels. And then maybe Har gets a promotion if there's somebody that they can move up. But there's not even extended spring guys that are first basemen. So the way that the hitters really fall, the way that they fit, you could make the argument maybe higher up the chains that there's some guys that are in line for a promotion. But I do agree with your point that you could see some organizational type guys moving up. I just don't know that you can take those types of guys away from Cedar Rapids because those guys are the ones that are producing all the runs and scoring all the runs there. So I would leave them there and try to win a couple games instead of move the guys that have been productive for you to sit on the bench in Fort Myers.
No, and I agree. And maybe more what I'm doing as opposed to guys that are going to get promoted, I'm just saying they're candidates to be promoted, and there's the guys that are performing. Maybe that's really all we're doing is recognizing the guys that have performed here in basically their first half. And if we were to really truly look at who could get promoted, you'd have to start at the highest level and work your way down and say, okay, like you said, maybe Vargas moves up to AAA, so Mike Gonzalez moves up to AA, and Brian Har moves up to Fort Myers, and that's probably the way to do it. But because we're starting at Cedar Rapids, really we're just kind of recognizing guys who could get, if there was a need, promoted, but mainly just saying these guys are performing pretty well. But if you were to look at the pitchers, I think for a long time a lot of people were saying, hey, Aaron Slegers is a guy that could move up. I mean, the guy's got a 5.05 ERA right now, and nothing against him. He actually is pitching better than that ERA, but there's nothing about his statistics that scream out he needs to move up to Fort Myers. I mean, his WHIP is 1.29, but the one guy who has pitched better than I think any of us probably would have expected is Cole Stewart. And yet the question that continues to come up for him is he's got 38 strikeouts in 55 innings, which is about 2 every 3 innings, so maybe 6.5 strikeouts per 9. A lot of people concerned about that. Are you?
Well, I kind of wrote about that a little bit last night, and I said it's enough to raise an eyebrow at, but not enough to be alarmed over. And we had talked earlier, and it had been mentioned that he wasn't throwing his slider, but
and he is now.
And he is now. But I'm not going to get too worried about it. I think my comment was, I don't have it up, was he's pitching as well as he is with guys hitting the ball. Can you imagine how good his statistics will look once guys start swinging and missing at the ball?
Right. And to me, go ahead.
Well, his numbers are if you just disregarded strikeouts, which I know you can't do, but if you did, his numbers are really good. And there's the other side of that coin where it's not like he's just going to start striking out better hitters. But at the same time, he's a raw pitcher. And he'll start to figure stuff out. He'll start to figure out how to put guys away. And the experts on this, which I am not, the experts aren't worried. So why should I be?
Yeah, and that's my thought too. Is early in the season he wasn't using one of his best pitches, and then secondly, um, I mean he is 19 and he's pitching against guys that are anywhere from say 20 to 24. I mean there's some of these guys that spent 3 years or 4 years in college. Some of these guys who have been in pro ball for anywhere from 4 to 6 years. I mean, if they came through the international programs. And those guys know how to hit. I mean, he throws 93, 95, but even in the top college programs and in the low levels of pro ball, there's guys that can do that. And he's throwing a curveball. And again, the top hitters, they've seen those types of pitches. But even though they've seen those and they're making some contact, they must not be making very good contact because the opponents just aren't hitting him at all. So to me, it's very encouraging as his pitches gain more, whatever the word is, oomph, or sharpness and confidence and all that kind of stuff. He's only going to get better. So to me, there's a lot to be encouraged about. Not saying at all, I wouldn't promote him. I think you're going to be careful with his innings. He's only going about 5 per game, but his whip, his not too many walks. He's kept the ball in the ballpark, 1 home run in 55 innings. I mean that speaks volumes to what he's been able to do.
Right. I think what we're seeing where he's at right now is I think he has learned to control his pitches, um, but I don't know that he commands them all extremely well. And what I mean by that is he can throw them for strikes, and I think they're probably good strikes based on the results, but I don't think that he's, hitting corners. I don't think that he's, the throwing the ones that are close off the plates that are going to get a guy to chase. I think it's early in his development where, let's work on your stuff. Let's do that, and then that next step should be, okay, let's get him to chase this pitch on, a 1-2 count. Let's play with these guys a little bit more. But at the same time, if he's producing outs that are effective and he's not giving up a lot of runs, why waste bullets on strike threes if you can get the out on 2 less pitches?
Absolutely.
So do I like strikeouts? Heck yeah, but I'm not gonna get alarmed until the numbers get worse, because right now the numbers are perfectly fine. And I've made the comment before that I think they could promote him. I don't know that they necessarily will, although, and we can talk about this more later, there has been almost a more aggressive approach lower in the system. We talk about that when we cover the draft, but there's been a much more aggressive approach with these younger guys, and maybe Cole Stewart, maybe we see that effect on Cole Stewart at some point this year.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't anticipate it, but I've been surprised by a few different promotions. And kind of speaking to that, 3 guys that have been promoted or actually 4 guys that have been promoted to the Colonels from extended spring are doing well. And one of them, I think, is a candidate, maybe, if there were a need in the bullpen up in Fort Myers, to get called up, and that's Todd Van Steensel, who, again, I think people know the story. He was in the organization a couple of years ago as a starter and was okay. Got released, went back to Australia, got some goggles, kind of developed the Grant Balfour type of mentality, and now he's come back throwing harder and doing a great job out of the bullpen. In 13 appearances and 22 innings, he's got a 1.23 ERA and a 0.91 WHIP. He's given up 3 earned runs so far, and all 3 of them have been on solo home runs. So that is one thing. But he's their closer now. He's got 5 saves. Interesting character. But I mean, he's older, and he's learned this new role, and so far so good. The other one's Jared Wilson's a guy who's a 5th-year senior, I think. Jeremy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, from last year's draft that they had drafted a couple times. He came up late, and in only 9 games and 16 innings, he's given up just 3 earned runs as well. He's got 18 strikeouts in 16 innings and really playing pretty well. The other two that I think we can spend just a minute talking about, we did see the debuts of Fernando Romero and Lewis Thorpe, and I encourage people tomorrow, if you're listening to this, check out Twins Daily. Our good friend Steve Boer, he made the trip from Cedar Rapids over to Kane County, which is not a short trip, to go see both of these guys make their debuts. And we talked a little last week about them. Fernando Romero made his first start, and he gave up 2 runs in 5 innings on 7 hits, walked 1 and struck out 6. And then Lewis Thorpe actually had 3 shutout innings before giving up a few in the 4th and into the 5th. But he went 4.2 innings, gave up 5 runs on 6 hits. He walked 3 and struck out 1. So, one start doesn't mean a whole lot for either one of them, but it is exciting to see a couple of real prospects joining Cole Stewart in that rotation. So, any other thoughts from you, Jeremy, on any of that or anything on Cedar Rapids?
No, I think there's probably some jitters with those guys making that first full season start. And really how are guys going to react or adjust when there's people on base? And I think that's something that, Thorpe, like you said, he was cruising, and then all of a sudden, he hit a rough patch and never really seemed to come back from that. And I think that's one of those things that it's important to see how these guys can adjust.
Correct. Should we jump up to the Miracle?
Say that one more time.
Should we jump to the Miracle?
Yeah, I'm having a Gleamanish type problem right now. I have a cat that's making all sorts of noise, and I don't know where it is.
Oh, okay. Well, let me talk a little bit about this Miracle game while you go figure out your feline situation. The Miracle had a 10-0 win over Charlotte tonight in a game in which they had just 5 hits. However, they also had 8 walks. But Jorge Polanco, Aderlin Mejia, Mike Gonzalez, and Stuart Turner each walked twice. Stephen Wickens, though, who just came back off the disabled list to the Miracle, he was 2 for 4 with a triple, a home run, and 5 of the RBIs. Now, so that was the offense. Tim Shibuya last month, or the month of May, was number 2 in my list of the top relief pitching performances during that month. He made 1 start last week, and so this was his 2nd start today. He went 7 innings, gave up no runs on 2 hits. He didn't walk anyone and struck out 4. So he appears to be healthy for the first time in over a year and a half, almost 2 years, and that's good to see because he can pitch. Then B.J. Hermson came in for the 8th. He gave up 2 hits but didn't allow a run in a scoreless inning. And Alex Wimmers pitched the 9th and struck out the side. So the Miracle, I think their magic number to clinch the first half is about 5 right now, which is pretty impressive, considering some of the injuries they've had in the outfield, and some of the prospects that have struggled from time to time adjusting to the Florida State League.
Yeah, Shibuya, he's an interesting character because he was the Appy League Pitcher of the Year. And then, from what I recall, started the season well in Beloit, and then had the issues where he was hurt, and then came back last year, pitched in Elizabethton again and pitched pretty well, but then didn't pitch great in Cedar Rapids. And now he's moved up more into a bullpen role. But if there's guys that you want to talk about maybe taking that next step, maybe he's a guy that and I don't know exactly what their plan is, if they're working him into the rotation, stretching him out a little bit, or whatever the case may be. But he's a guy that I think he'll never project as a MLB starter, but he's a guy that I think if he holds on long enough, will continue to progress up the system.
He's a guy that reminds me a lot in many ways of Kevin Slowey. And I know that a lot of people didn't like the way the Kevin Slowey situation played out, but before he was hitting the wrist by a line drive and ended up putting some screws in his wrist, he was a pretty good prospect and a pretty decent pitcher who hasn't been able to take that next step, I think in large part because of the injury. But they're very similar. They throw a lot of strikes. They don't overpower. I think Shibuya's got a 3-pitch mix. He knows how to pitch, and you mentioned earlier about the command and control. Well, he's got control, and he definitely has command as well. And I mean, we'll see how it plays out here, but he could make a few more starts, and he would be a candidate to move up. I spent a lot of time talking to him at spring training. Just a very smart guy, very cerebral, very calm. But very focused too. I mean, you can definitely see that, and that shows up when he's pitching. So I really like watching him pitch. Kind of not a big guy at all. He just small school, Division II school. These are the kind of guys you like to follow. Another guy that I think was drafted in a round that was certainly a day 3 guy.
Yeah, he was, and I know that wasn't he like a San Diego?
Yep.
So that wouldn't be D2. That would be, isn't that D1?
I thought it was D2, but I could be wrong.
I mean, we're splitting hairs here, and we don't really need to.
Right.
But yeah, not someone that was expected to be, especially the Appy League Player of the Year. Obviously, you hit it on the head when you said he's smart, and he goes into a league where he just has to outsmart the hitters, and he seemed to do a fairly good job with that. He also, isn't he the knitter?
He might be.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
I think he knits hats for teammates.
Yep.
I think that's something that I read.
I do have a question on Twitter from Aram D. Erickson, if I'm saying that correctly. On the topic of Fort Myers, can you guys also talk about a possible promotion of J.O. Barrios? I'd like your thoughts on that topic, Jeremy.
Well,
because I get asked that a lot.
As you may know, when I did my prospect list in the 2013 handbook,
I can feel some humbleness coming up. I can just feel humbleness.
Say that.
You're about to make a very humble comment.
I am. I was way higher on him than I maybe should have been, and had him ranked 5th in the organization. But then I turned around and I was disappointed in his performance in Cedar Rapids last year, because I just expected him to dominate, because that's been my expectation for him all along. And now he's dominating. So why not just give him another step? I'll tell you why. Because it's a huge step. And he's young, and he dealt with, issues last year, just not being as good as he could have been. I'm content with letting him ride this out, another month. And then if he's the representative on the in the futures game, make the promotion after that. Yeah. And make that build up. But there was it Suhan that just wrote that article about him. He's a guy. I mean, J.O. Barrios he's a guy, and I don't know that we put him in that category before, but he is. And if he turns out to be a number 3 starter for the Twins, they got 2 pretty good pitchers. Again, he hasn't made that big step to Double-A yet, but he is young. So I'd be content. I would be happy to see a promotion, but not until mid-July.
I'm kind of in the same boat, because it's been just 11 starts. But if you are concerned about strikeouts, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying you in general, but if you're concerned about the strikeouts that Cole Stewart is not accumulating in Cedar Rapids, take a look at Barrios. He has 74 strikeouts in 64 1/3 innings, well, 5-2 with a 2.24 ERA, and 64 innings in 11 starts means he's averaging almost 6 starts per inning, or 6 innings per start, when you consider at the beginning of the year they were on a pretty strict pitch limit for a few games at least. But I think you make a very good point. You consider, the dominance that DJ Baxendale had last year as a 22-year-old in Fort Myers, and the struggles he fought, injury-related or other, as he went to New Britain. You look at Matt Summers a year ago as a 23, maybe even 24-year-old, was the ERA leader in the Florida State League, and he struggled enough in Double-A that he's been moved to the bullpen kind of permanently at this point for the Rockcats. Taylor Rogers, he had 3 rough starts, and he's been pretty good in about 10 of his last 11 starts. So, I mean, it's not to say that you're going to struggle and you're going to end up in the bullpen. It's just to say that is a huge jump. 11 starts is a great start, but I'm with you. I like that timeline that you talk about. That let him represent the Twins in the futures game in mid-July. That'll give him another maybe 5 starts for the miracle. You get him up to 16 starts. You maybe throw him up to about 90, 95 innings, and then move him up to Double-A and get him, say, 5 more starts. Just so we get to taste a little bit this year, and knowing him and seeing what he does workout-wise and stuff, if he struggles even in Double-A, he's going to come back and work even harder in the offseason and probably dominate next year. So I'm just really excited about him. I always had him, I think, in that 7-8 range, Jeremy, of prospect, whereas you had him in that 5. But right now, he's my number 5, and it's not, particularly close. I mean, we'll talk about some of those other guys, I'm sure, as we go forward here, but he's earned it at this point.
Do you think that, and here's the one thing that I would consider. I would like to, if I'm going to have to hand the ball to somebody in the playoffs in the Florida State League, I want to see him with the ball. New Britain doesn't seem like they're on the way to the playoffs. Fort Myers could lock that up. Is that enough of a reason to not promote him?
I don't think so, and yet at the same time, what's the race to make 5 starts at Double-A?
Exactly.
I made the comment that sure, if he could go up there and maybe get through some of those initial struggles and learn from those and come back in the offseason, is that better than just letting him continue to pitch well in the Florida State League in important games leading up to a playoff series? It may be better. Honestly, this is one of those situations where sure, I'd like to see him move up, but regardless, he's starting next year in New Britain. So what do those 5 starts mean? I believe, and I know that a lot of people disagree or maybe have a different version of this, I think one of the skills that can be learned in player development is learning to win as a team, and getting that winning atmosphere, or that, what do I have to do type of thing. And to be able to play, if he's able to pitch in some Florida State championship series games, there's a lot of value in that. So no, you make a good point, and that's why if he isn't promoted, he starts next year as a 20-year-old in Double-A. That's still pretty good.
Right. Well, he'll start next year in Major League Spring Training. Is where
Correct. Right.
And that's going to be huge. Yeah, I mean, he'll spend April and May in New Britain, and but he's a guy that once you get to Double-A, and we've discussed that quite frequently too. Once you get to Double-A, now we start to know what we have here. And I think at the end of the day, you hit it on the head when you said we know where he's starting next year, so let's not. I mean, we don't need to freak out about those 5 starts that he could get.
Right.
I would love to see him stay in Fort Myers to pitch in the playoffs.
Yep. And, honestly, here's the other thing is people don't like hearing this as well, but you have to make decisions on other guys, older guys, at some point, and you have to kind of throw them into the fire. And I know that sounds kind of mean, but you've got some 24 and 25-year-olds and guys like Matt Tomshaw, who's 6-1 with a 1.95 ERA and a 0.99 WHIP. And you've got David Hurlbut, who's got a 2.05 ERA and a 1.12 WHIP. And you've got Jason Wheeler, who was very good for them last year, who has a 2.47 ERA and 73 innings. So those are 3 guys that I would probably promote one of them, if not 2 of them, before Barrios, just because I don't see anything wrong. I get challenging players, but I don't see anything wrong with letting a guy gain some confidence, and really master a level, especially when you're not jumping him to the big leagues.
Right. Anybody else we want to talk about Fort Myers?
I mean, honestly, the other guy that I'd talk about, the hitter on the team that made the All-Star team, is Adam Walker, and he's been just really good since a slow start. I tweeted some of it, but I mean, his slugging and OPS in the last, say, 6 weeks is really tremendous. And to me, the topic with him is he's got the 14 home runs, the 51 RBIs, and I know people don't like that term run producer because it is dependent on so many other things. But to this point in his career, that's exactly what he's been. Now he's got 72 strikeouts in about 260 plate appearances, so about 1 in every 4 plate appearances, which isn't great. But 16 walks isn't a lot, but if you consider his batting average right now is 247, his on-base percentage is 291, that isolated discipline, the difference between those is at that .044 number. And to me, the number that I think is important is if he can hit 5.5 or 6. To me, that puts him into, okay, that's where players are. That's where players can succeed long term. And so he's still a little bit shy of that, though I think he's actually pretty improved from last year in that category. So I know, with all these different players, there's certain numbers that you look at or don't worry about, things like that. Like a middle infielder, I'm not going to care so much about their slugging percentage, unless they're a home run hitter like Brian Dozier has become. But, a guy like Aderlin Mejia, it's worthless to look at his slugging percentage. For me, the number with Adam Bretlocker that I look at is that isolated discipline, because that I think is going to tell us whether he's going to have any staying power in the big leagues.
I think I'm probably not as high on Walker as everybody else, and maybe that's because I'm a sucker for some scouting reports that suggest that maybe the swing's too long, that he won't ever succeed at a higher level. He's got raw power for days, and that's fantastic. But I'm totally cool with him staying at Fort Myers because we talk about a jump for Berrios. The jump is going to be bigger for Walker.
Right.
We saw Sano what happened. Sano is a better hitter than Walker. And then last year he makes that jump to Double-A, and he's hitting not very good. Sano, I think, had a better idea of the strike zone, but still had a lot of issues in Double-A. Could Walker, make those improvements? He absolutely could. But I think at this point, and, people were quick to judge why he wasn't moved up last year, and then he wasn't. I kind of have those same feelings about him this year. We know where he'll start next year. He'll start next year in Double-A, but I'd be totally content with him, making all these adjustments for the rest of the year. Continuing to get that strikeout percentage to drop, take more walks, and see what happens in the spring when he finally takes his first trip to New Britain.
Yeah, and for me, you got to get that on base percentage above 300. Ideally, you get that thing up to about 320 or 330. Even before you'd even think about moving him up. I certainly wouldn't. I think you just let him continue to play. There's so many parts of your game, and you don't want him to be overwhelmed. The other thing to remember is, for all the grief he took last year for being quote unquote old for the level, he doesn't turn 23 until after the season. So he's spending this whole season at 22 in the Florida State League, and he's on pace right now to have about 30 home runs. That's pretty rare in the Florida State League. So I think let's just let him play. He's not old. He's not. And there's enough, as you said, the strikeouts are concerned, the walks are concerned. Let him make those improvements. The defense still, he has work to do out there defensively. And let's not forget he played a lot of first base in college. So, the outfield's still somewhat new to him. He's just such a raw talent that you have to be really careful. He's pretty strong mentally and his good makeup and all that kind of stuff, but there's no reason to put him in a situation to fail. And I'm not saying he would with certainty, but I'm just saying that it doesn't make any sense to push him at this time. So I just, my point in bringing him up was really to bring up that isolated discipline, which has improved this year, but, there's still plenty of improvement to go there as well.
For sure.
All right, New Britain. New Britain tonight played Reading and beat them 5-4. Sam Fold had a home run, I believe, to lead off the game in his what could be his final rehab day with New Britain. Brandon Waring, he was 1 for 2 with 2 walks in his 13th double. Tony Thomas, 2 for 4. And Kenys Vargas hit his 10th home run of the season in that game. So, the Rockcats won. I didn't actually write down the pitchers. That was kind of dumb. I don't know why I didn't write down the pitchers. I'll have to do that. But, yeah, they won 5-4. Anyone on New Britain you'd like to talk about while I go and look at that scoreboard?
I think we should talk about Eddie Rosario.
Yep, for sure.
Eddie Rosario was fantastic last year, struggled in the AFL, struggled in his winter league, came back from suspension, struggled in just a handful of games at Fort Myers, gets promoted to New Britain, and it's the Eddie Rosario of old. And what really is standing, he's always been advanced with the bat. I mean, that was obvious when he led Elizabethton in home runs, when he was, hitting more home runs than Sano. It was obvious when he was at Cedar Rapids, and or I guess he was at Beloit, and just looked like the professional hitter. And he continued that trend in Fort Myers, continued that trend in New Britain, and now he's continuing that trend at New Britain again. What stands in the way of him and Target Field?
Not a lot. Right now, Eduardo Escobar is playing shortstop. That's his position. And for right now, Danny Santana's earned that time in center field, and we'll see how that plays out over the next month or couple of months. And Sam Fold will obviously get back there as well. Obviously, the 50 games hurt him. My honest opinion, and I've been asked this, and I don't like to throw this out too often, but Eddie Rosario, I think, would be in the big leagues right now if not for that 50-game suspension. He would have started the season at New Britain. He'd probably be hitting 280 to 300. With a Brian Dozier move, he probably would be in center field for the Rockcats. And when the Twins had a need in center field, I would not have been surprised if they went right to him. 40 games into the season. He had plenty of time in New Britain last year, plus say 40 or 50 games this year. That's enough. Get him up there if he would have been ready. No, we don't know how that would have played out over the 50 games, of course, but I would not at all be surprised if he would have been up. And I'll say this, I won't be surprised if he is up before September, or certainly in September.
Yeah, he obviously wasn't up because when there was a need, he wasn't available. But hitting-wise, is there questions about his ability to hit at the major league level?
I don't think so. I mean, he does have a non-typical approach to the plate, but again, I've talked to you many times about this, or I've written about it. His hands are so quick. His eyes and ability to wait back in the zone and use the whole field. I mean, it's cliche, and Twins fans are sick of hearing it, but he does such a good job of letting the ball get deep into the zone and then just slapping it with authority the opposite direction. And in fact, he's got the kind of power and the kind of confidence, and there's not a lot of players in the organization with the kind of confidence that Eddie Rosario have. I'd say Oswaldo Arcia is in that category as well, who aren't afraid to just take a huge hack either. I mean, he is not a slap hitter by any means, and I think he could play there. I mean, obviously we don't know. You have to get up there and you have to take advantage of that opportunity the way Santana has to this point, or maybe the way Aaron Hicks hasn't to this point. But I just believe his bat can play in the big leagues probably now. He struggled for 3 games in Fort Myers. He hit well for 4 games in Fort Myers, and they got him right up to New Britain, which to me tells you how they feel about Eddie Rosario.
Now, when you make the comparison to Arcia, Eddie's got a little more of a quiet confidence, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, but let's not forget in Elizabethton, he wasn't afraid to pimp some homers himself and do a little talking around the bases, and there were some things that were happening that year with him and Sano in Elizabethton that other teams weren't exactly happy about. No, I mean, I don't know how he is with teammates and things like that, but I mean, he's certainly not afraid to outwardly show that he's a pretty good ball player.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying he's not Joe Mauer.
Right. Um, would you consider that? I mean, this is off topic. Do you think that's more of a cultural thing?
I I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can speak to is the coaching I had, in Central Minnesota, where you're basically taught, respect the game and what that means here, and to each individual coach. I don't know. I don't know. It might be, but
But I mean,
that's
I know,
bordering on topics I don't need to be discussing.
but I mean, I know you don't have the MLB Network, but
Nope.
so you didn't watch a lot of the World Baseball Classic. It was
No.
very obvious to me the Venezuelans, the Dominicans. That's a different breed of ball that they're playing. It's a far more um, emotionally charged breed of ball, and I think that you bring those guys up, like you mentioned, Sano and Rosario, that they weren't used to playing American baseball, not the American way, and there's gonna be issues. And even Arcia now, I mean, he might rub people the wrong way. Dude's just pumped to play baseball,
Yeah.
and there's nothing
Yeah,
wrong
and I
with it.
think that's the line. That's the line. If you're just having fun and you're pumped to play baseball, I sometimes have a little bit of a problem with completely showing a guy up. But if you're running around the bases and smiling and clapping because you're excited, you just hit a big home run. I don't have a problem with that. If you're, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to explain. You just see it. There's a difference, and I have had no problem with anything RC has done to this point. I'm typically even okay. I mean, I didn't have any problems with anything like Barry Bonds did. Jock Jones always flipped his bat. Kirby Puckett was a good bat flipper. Torrey Hunter's a good bat flipper. I mean, uh, you know, it it's different.
Torrey Hunter,
I
Torrey
think
Hunter,
Carlos Gomez goes over the line a bit, but
Torrey Hunter was an 80 grade bat flipper for the Twins. I loved
for
him.
sure,
I
for
loved
sure. And that's why I don't think it's cultural. It's just individuals, and to me, you should have fun. And I like watching people wear their emotions on their sleeves, and I like clearly seeing that guys are having fun playing ball. There's a line, and it's hard to see, but you kind of see it when you see it, I guess.
Hey, how good is Yasiel Puig?
He's really good at baseball.
Holy smokes, he's a good baseball player.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm just watching some stuff on the TV. Okay, moving on. Are we ready for Rochester? Are they done yet?
We are. Just a couple other things real quick. Danny Ortiz was moved up to Rochester. I think that's worth talking about. Kenneth Vargas was a name that Terry Ryan mentioned as maybe a guy that has been nominated to play in the Futures game. Um, Other than that, I think Sean Gilmartin's pitching really well, and Lester Oliveros is pretty much ready to move up. So, those are the things. Mark Hamburger's pitched in 3 games since his return, 6 innings, just 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts. So, he's a guy I think worth watching too because he does have the baseball or the big league pedigree is the right word, but he's got the service time in the big leagues already. So, he just finished his 50-game suspension as well, and it'll be interesting to see how the Twins kind of play or how they kind of use him over the next few months. But other than
Um,
that, yeah, we're ready to go to Rochester.
I got one quick question. If it was up to you, would Lester Oliveros be in the big leagues right now?
Uh, no, but AJ Octor would be.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about AJ Actor and those Rochester Red Wings.
Hey, let's do that. Well, tonight they are playing somebody. That would be the Gwinnett Braves, and they're still not done. They're going. Oh, it is done. They've won 7-4. Chris Colabello, which is good to see, was 3 for 5 with 2 doubles, and he's been hitting a lot better of late. James Beresford another two hit night, and he had another double. Davidson Romero had 2 doubles and 4 at bats. Um, the team had 11 hits, and only Eric Ferris and Dan Rolfing, who walked twice, didn't have hits. Pedro Flormon, for those Twins fans still wondering what he's up to, he hit his second home run. He was 1 for 3 with a walk in the game. He's hitting 220 right now. So still not exactly driving the ball for the Rochester Red Wings. Trevor May, as I mentioned earlier, he gets the win. He improves to 6-4. but he gave up 3 runs on 6 hits and 3 walks and 5 1/3, striking out 4, kind of going back a little bit to some of the concerns he's had in the past. Ryan Presley's been really good. He gave up 2 hits but no runs in an inning and a third. He struck out 2. Aaron Thompson's been pretty good. Inning and a third, 1 walk, 1 strikeout, no runs. And Michael Tonkin came in, gave up 1 run on 2 hits in an inning. His ERA sit at 2.08. So the Red Wings are now, they've been playing pretty well. They're at 37-28. I think they're leading the division, but they're playing well, which is weird for that team. They made the playoffs. They made a big jump last year at Twins Daily. Chris Fee did a nice Q&A. Part 1 is up there with Gene Glynn, and I thought it was very interesting how he talked about having a couple of prospects, and now Santana's actually up, but he's got the pitching prospects and many veterans, and kind of that relationship and being able to use both veterans and young players and prospects on the same roster. It's interesting, so be sure to check that out.
Talking about that roster a little bit, you had mentioned Octor, you had mentioned Gil Martin. One of the things came up in a Twins Daily forum last night about moving up. If the Twins gave up on Correa, obviously this is before tonight, or Deduno and moved up Meyer or May, about having to bring guys up that may not deserve to come up from AAA to the big leagues. And, I don't know that would be an issue. Obviously, Chris Johnson's pitched well, Logan Darnell's pitched well, that they would still be there. But there are guys in AA that could very easily move up to AAA as well. So, you wonder about that team and how they're doing as well as they are. I think it's pretty easy to tell. They have Alex Meyer, who could be in the big leagues. They have Logan Darnell, who pitched 3 innings but could be in the big leagues. They have Chris Johnson. He could be in the big leagues. They have Trevor May. He could be in the big leagues. They have Scott Diamond. He can't be right now. But they do have Johan Pino, and he also could be. So if you're wondering why the Red Wings are as good as they are right now and how they're in first place in the International League North, it's on the strength of their starting pitching.
Well, it's that plus Ryan Presley's pitching really well. AJ Octor's pitching great. I mean, his whip right now with the Red Wings in almost 30 innings is 0.61. He's given up 12 hits and 6 walks in 26 and 2/3 innings. Edgar Ibarra has been really good after a slow start. Aaron Thompson's another lefty pitching well. Yoelis Guerra's been pretty good. Matt Hoffman had the strong spring, and he's been okay. And Tonkin, he's been really good too. So, that entire pitching staff is doing well. But, at AAA, it is about veterans. It's not about prospects. You've got basically Danny Ortiz right now, who's what you'd call a prospect, and the rest are kind of veteran guys. So, it is an interesting dynamic, to be sure.
Absolutely. Do we want to hit on any more Rochester stuff, or should we take some questions and head to the draft?
Yeah, I think let's take a couple questions. We've kind of covered the big ones.
2 questions on the Twins Daily site. First one's from Lightfoot, and we kind of covered his first question. Can you see any miracle players moving up to AA by July 1st, and why? I'm wondering if we could see a lineup in AA with Buxton at center, Polanco at short, Rosario at second, Sano at DH, Vargas at first base, Walker at right field, Rodriguez at left field, Coach at catcher, and Wickens at third. Buxton, I think, if he can get healthy, and this can kind of answer this Kevin Lewis question as well, should we be worried about Buxton's wrist becoming a long-term issue? Like you've said a number of times, let's not worry about it until it's time to worry about it. And it's a risk deal. And we've talked before about should it be something that we worry about long term. I'm not ready to do that. Could it potentially become something? It obviously could. But at this time, let's just see what happens. Give it a couple. I'd probably give it another month before I really worry again, because there is no timeline on it. But let's see if he can get back by July 1st. in Fort Myers before we start talking about moving up to Double A by that time. He's not even returned to baseball activities as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't think he's even doing anything in extended spring baseball related yet either. I don't know that, but I haven't heard that to this point. Polanco, I see no reason to call him up. He's still a work in progress as he's moving back over to shortstop more full time. He's been improved, but that batting average now is dropped as well. He's at like 283, which isn't bad, and I'm not saying he's been poor, but he hasn't hit like he did the first month, and that's why it's always, we've talked about it many times, you can't just move guys up when they have a hot month. You have to kind of let it play out a little bit. And like Adam Walker, we kind of talked about that as well. I think Polanco and Walker should both spend the entire season in Fort Myers, and I think it would be best for their development. You mentioned Wickens at third base. I certainly think that's realistic, and we have already heard that there's a decent chance that Miguel Sano will get DH at bats this season somewhere in the minors. I don't know if it'll be at Double A because I anticipate it'll be more at Gulf Coast League so they can monitor it. Maybe even get him to Fort Myers just because they can keep him in tabs or keep tabs of him in the where their facilities are as well. But it all really depends on when he's able to first get into a game, and I don't anticipate that being necessarily real soon.
All I know is that if they clinch the first round, if they make the playoffs, my second half plan for Miguel Sano goes something along the lines of DH wherever, and then get to Fort Myers for the Florida State League playoffs.
There you go.
Be a part of that because that would be freaking awesome. That's what I say.
Yeah, I mean, might as well do the same with Buxton too.
Exactly. And you have Walker in right field.
Right.
You still have Polanco. You have Goodrum. You have all those guys.
Harrison in left.
I have no problem with the team doing that.
And then I'd want Jason Kanzler in center for the playoffs, though, just for his defense.
Oh, yeah, because you're going to just not put Buxton in center.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he can probably play there. Good point. Maybe I should write this stuff down. But anyway, I think we've answered that question.
Yeah. Would they struggle or likely be as potent as Cedar Rapids or the Miracle were in 2013? We've touched on that too. That's a huge jump. I would guess a lot of those guys, if they were moved up by July 1st, would absolutely struggle.
Yep.
Next question from KOHG, wondering if Morales may have a multi-year contract with the Twins at the end of the season, especially with both Correa and Willingham coming off the books. What do you think?
I think no, which kind of leads back to our earlier discussion. Maybe they should trade him at the deadline if they can. And I say no for a couple of reasons. One, you haven't really invested a lot in Vargas, but he's there. And if you feel at the end of the year that he could be ready sometime next year, I don't think you give multi-years to Morales. And I think Morales is going to get that multi-year because he won't likely have the franchise tag. I'm not saying don't give him the what do you call it? The qualifying offer. I would have no problem with the Twins doing that.
You can't.
Because it's in season?
Yeah, because he's got to spend the full year with the team.
Is that for sure, or did Terry Ryan look that one up again after the press conference?
That's the truth. I don't know what Terry Ryan said.
Okay. Well, no, he had initially said that they would be able to offer him the qualifying offer, and then it was almost like he started thinking about it. And I know with in-season trades, they can't do the qualifying offer, but I think there was some question about in-season free agent signings if they would be able to. So.
Well, I think the rule reads is that you have to spend the entire season with a team, and he did his entire season. I would say I'm 95% sure on that one.
Okay. Well, and if that's the case, if he's not going to get a qualifying offer, he's going to get a multi-year deal from somebody, and I don't think that should be the Twins. The other thing is with the Miguel Sano situation, even if he can play third base generally every day with the Twins, I would also want to make sure that he's getting plenty of time at DH too, just as a precaution. I think you're going to want, guys like In general, I don't want to sign a designated hitter to be just a designated hitter. When you've
Right.
got guys, and you've got enough guys that can play the position, and just to give themselves a half of a day off, I don't think it makes sense to sign a guy a DH to a multi-year deal.
Right. And that's where I'm sitting too. He could play a little first, but that job's pretty much squared away. So um,
Yeah.
there's just a few questions that I want to get to. We can answer a couple of these next week because I'd like to talk about the draft. But a question that says Danny Santana is still taking grounders. Do you know that? I would assume he is, but probably his focus is on center field right now.
Right now, I'm sure it is. I've always questioned whether or not he can actually be a big league shortstop, but I would make sure he's continuing to work on it because we don't know what's going to happen with Escobar or any of those prospects coming up. So if he's got any chance of playing shortstop, keep getting him ground balls and keep working with him because he may be needed there.
And these are questions from Tom Gorgon, I believe is how you say it. Um, Another question is Vargas the DH in 2015.
I would say not at the beginning of the year, but I could see that happening later in the season. I could see that happening if there were an injury. I think there's ways where he could be at some point. Um, I fully expect him to spend all or most of the year, especially now with the Morales signing at Double A, and maybe start next season either way at Triple A. Um, there's just no rush with him. Unless they're in contention and they feel like he can do a good job off the bench, but he's probably not going to be the regular. I don't know. I don't see it as a regular at the beginning of the year next year as DH.
And also, what is the upside of Trevor May?
I mean, I think if he can throw strikes, he can be a number two. I mean, he throws hard. He strikes out more than a batter an inning. He's got 3 pitches. I mean, he can be a number two. I think realistically, he's a 3 or a 4. And then there's always the other side of that. Maybe he's a fifth or sixth starter, or maybe he's a bullpen arm. But the upside, I think, is number two starter.
Right. I think the thing is he's not the typical Twins number four pitcher of yesteryear. He's got
Right.
potential. Um, and we're seeing the good Trevor May. And once he starts walking guys, then he's the bad Trevor May. Let's just cut the questions there. 10:47. We got about 13 more minutes. We can maybe extend that a little bit. But let's talk draft. Um, Seth and I will both be joining the Talk to Contact podcast tomorrow. We'll be talking more draft. But just as a little rundown of what happened, um, Nick Gordon signed yesterday. He signed for slot, which is like 3.851 million. And the Twins announced that he will report to Fort Myers and head to Elizabethton, which I think surprised both of us. Aaron Hicks didn't make it to Elizabethton until like almost 2 years after he was drafted, it seems like. And Nick Gordon's going to be doing it right away. So thanks to the change in some rules, we have guys signing quicker. Gordon was the first rounder to officially sign. Part of that, I think, has to do with where he fits as a shortstop. They have Vielma up at Cedar Rapids, which I think we all kind of thought he would be at Fort Myers, or excuse me, at Elizabethton, but he's been pitching or playing shortstop pretty well. So Gordon will fit there. I would anticipate he spends his whole season there. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I was shocked he didn't go to the Gulf Coast League, as you mentioned, for other prospects. I mean, even Byron Buxton spent 3-4 weeks at GCL before moving up to Elizabethton, and he didn't exactly perform well. I mean, Joe Mauer's one that went right to Elizabethton, but I can't think of one since then, and maybe I didn't pay enough attention before that, but yeah, it definitely surprised me. But you kind of watched the press conference. You watched his initial press conference. You saw the press conference after he signed. You kind of understand the bloodlines that this guy is well spoken and he is a very polished communicator. It's clear he's got very good makeup and that his dad's brought him up really well. or maybe he's just very good at saying the right things. But if his off-field maturity is as impressive as his on or as on if his on-field maturity is as impressive as his off-field maturity, I don't know. He could be pretty decent, right away in Elizabeth and this year. So, yeah, I was very surprised.
Right. I think that's kind of the X factor with him. The ability wise, everything seems to be fantastic, but at this point, you're dealing with a guy that's not only saying all the right things, but acting well beyond his 18 years. And with Mauer, it was he's not real vocal. With Buxton, he acted right, but also not extremely vocal. Uh, Very quiet in interviews and things like that. Um, Nick Gordon just seems different. He seems like kind of Brian Dozier's, that he'll be good with the media. Um, and I think he'll have to struggle at some point to see what you have there, but uh, it's been an encouraging first, what has it been, 5 days, um, with him as a professional baseball player.
I listened to a lot of the press conference at his signing on Monday afternoon, and you just saw the way he answered questions, the way he gave a lot of credit to his dad, the way he talked about now the work begins, even though he's been working hard this whole time. But Terry Ryan said some things as well, like, you know what, we expect him to struggle. We had Byron Buxton struggle 2 years ago. If you looked at his statistics from the first two, um, if you look at Buxton's statistics from his first year of short season ball, they weren't very good. He goes, we expect him to struggle, but we think that the best thing about the bloodlines is he'll understand that that's going to happen and be able to move on. But he also talked a lot about looking up to and admiring and wanting to be like Derek Jeter, which is a good thing. But as he was answering questions and the way he stood out, we don't know what kind of a leader he's going to be. But Jeter was my first thought. Buxton's a lot like Mauer. They're both very quiet. But like you said, there's something a little different, something leadershipy or whatever the word is. And maybe it's Dozier, maybe it's Jeter. Who knows? I guess we'll find out as he gets older.
It's an intangible at any rate.
Correct. I want,
Uh,
I want to ask you about a couple of guys in kind of the same sentence. The next two guys they drafted, second rounder Nick Birdie, third round Mike Cedroth,
yep.
and both of them are bullpen guys. And I think the initial response from people is, why are we getting guys that are bullpen guys to start with? I know there was the strategy in previous years to draft college bullpen arms that were big arms, try to make them starters. These are two guys, and maybe Cedroth will get a little bit of a chance as a starter, but these are guys. Birdie throws 98 to 99 consistently and has touched those higher numbers. Cedroth is hitting 98, 99 at times. Have multiple pitches, but in my mind, they're bullpen guys. I felt good about getting those guys because if you looked at the experts' opinions, the Twins got them well after the projections or the rankings said that they should have got them. So I was good with those. But then they started getting a lot more college relievers, and that's where I kind of went meh on the draft, kind of that 4 through 8 range. And nothing against those guys. I'm not going to pretend I know whether they're good, bad, indifferent. A couple of them had Tommy John surgeries already, which may have dropped them a little bit, so maybe they got steals. But I really like Birdie and Cedroth's potential. What are your thoughts on those two specifically? But then tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on the general strategy rounds 2 through 8.
Right. I thought Birdie was a great pick. Um, Individually, without looking at the whole group, you take a guy that is gonna enter the organization as their hardest thrower. Um, from what I understand, the Twins have no desire to try to make him a starter. They're going to let him go a fastball slider, um, and he's going to. I would be shocked in this organization if he ended the year in the major leagues. Um, but wouldn't necessarily find it shocking if he was, part of another organization where he got to the major leagues. He should be the first guy from this draft class to be a major leaguer. Um,
I think so too.
and if it's him and Fiend as the setup guys at some point early next year for Perkins, that would be pretty huge. If something were to happen to Perkins, um, Birdie's your closer, and I mean, it's dirty what he does with a baseball. If you watch that game Friday night or maybe it was Saturday night, I don't know. Um, he's pumping 98 to 100 mile an hour fastballs, and then throwing an 88 mile an hour slider for a strike, and guys' knees just turn to noodles because you don't even know what the heck is happening. Um, Cedaroth, it was more non-committal on whether he might start or not because he throws more pitches. Um, his velocity is similar to Birdie's, probably not as consistent, not as easy. Um, his delivery is a little more violent, which would suggest that he shouldn't be starting. But he throws a slider as a strikeout pitch, but also has a changeup, which I think the Twins are thinking that with instruction, that changeup can get better. And all of a sudden now, if he's throwing a changeup, he could be a starter. Um, Even if he can't keep the 98 to 100 miles an hour, consistently through deeper innings, he's still going to be the hardest throwing starter that you have. What's going to probably happen is he'll start. He'll end up getting moved to the bullpen, and then people will complain that they should have done it earlier so he could move quicker. Uh, that typical stuff. Individually, again, a very good pick, a solid pick. The report was that he was going to demand over $1 million, but what I got was that my info was bad and that he'll sign for slot or a little bit over that. Sam Clay was a Georgia Tech guy that he's a good athlete. The Twins, liked him out of high school but knew that he was going to sign. Fastball in the low 90s. Curve has a chance to be a power weapon for him. He has a slider, but he goes to his curve more. And this is the scouting report on him would give him some chance to start, but he could fast track as a lefty setup guy. He's an aggressive kid where everything fits in that seventh and eighth inning setup role as a lefty guy. So I know that the Twins were pretty high on him. Jake Reed from Oregon. Oh, so anyway, Sam Clay individually, a fine pick. But again, we're looking at the collection of picks and seeing this pattern and wonder. Jake Reed was a good pick. One of the I'd heard it that he was one of the two most dominant college closers this year. One being Birdie, two being Reed. Not as hard of a thrower, but a guy that is pretty polished and could move quickly. John Curtis, sixth round pick. He's going to be in the College World Series, closing for the Longhorns. Individually, a fine pick in the sixth round, but at this point with 5 straight closer types, you got to be wondering. Andrew Kutera was a guy that was not really on the radars, but came on the recommendation of an area scout who had just loved him. He's going to be a starter for certain. Keaton Steele, the 8th rounder, is close from Missouri. It sounds like the Twins already have a deal with him. Max Murphy, the Twins have already got him signed, $130,000, which is about $20,000 under slot. And Randy LeBlanc, who, he's a guy that he has a year of eligibility left. He's 4 years out of high school, but he's a guy that has upside, which is weird. I don't know what he'll sign for. The Twins, they think that he's not, that he could turn up his curveball and his changeup to above average offerings. Again, individually, a fine pick. Collectively, a lot to scratch your head about on day 2. And I know you felt the exact same way. The Twins turn around then on day 3 and signed Kendry Morales, so you forget all about your pitching problems. Um, they turned around and they took Tanner English, who made maybe the greatest catch in the history of baseball.
Another
And
center fielder.
yeah, he's a center fielder who I think Baseball America said he could be a major league center fielder right now. Which my funny tweet after that was he'll be the first guy on the Twins roster that has that ability. So he's a guy that I know you like. Um, I know you like Kanzler, but English might be more advanced at this particular moment. Um, and then what I did is I clicked a button on my wife's computer, and I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Well, let's
Seriously.
do this then. Let's do this. Is there a guy from day 3 or two guys, and I know you and I both agree on one of them, and I think for about the same reason. Are there a guy or two that from day 3 you really think stood out to you as, okay, that's a guy we should really want them to sign?
Yeah, Roberto Gonzalez.
Yep.
Um, he was a 15th rounder, um, high school kid, and the immediate feedback that I got on him was, hey, if the Twins can get him signed, they've done great for themselves. Um, just the stuff that was said about him. Um, he was compared to almost like an international guy in that he's raw, but on any given day, he could show plus power, he could show plus speed, he could show plus arm strength. He's not a huge guy, uh, but it sounds like he's going to be officially a Twin on Thursday. He, if you follow him on Twitter, he wants to sign, and he's just not heading there till Thursday. I'm assuming he'll take his physical and he'll be a Twin shortly after that. But he's a guy that if I had to forecast his path, he'll go to the GCL, he'll play there, he'll probably struggle. Um, he'll do it again next year and probably do a little bit better. Go to Elizabethton in 2 years and hit a bunch of home runs. It'll take him a while, but he's going to be a guy that has tools, which the Twins love, and is just going to kind of be a teaser for a while. And um, in this type of organization, he's a lottery ticket, and let's buy it and just see what happens. Um, you kind of feel the same way, I believe.
Well, I mean, there's two different parts to that. They took Nick Gordon with the first round pick, and then every pick between 2 and 14 was a college guy, which is fine. Like you said, on individual cases, that's great. But I was so excited in round 15 when they took Gonzalez because he was a high school guy. And then you start reading about him, and he runs a 6.6 60. He has a good arm. He's got all those tools that make him a potential, 4 or 5 tool guy. If like things like the hit tool can show up. Like you said, he's a guy we're gonna have to be patient with, I'm sure. But the most exciting thing is since we've been on the show, he followed me on Twitter, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, I mean, I like that pick. I like the upside, and I guess maybe that's what I was missing on day 2, is that upside. Whereas, I mean, I see upside in Birdie, I see upside in Cedar Roth, and I see a lot of relievers and utility types. But you know what? If you're going to get guys that are going to be, if you talked about Sam Clay or Jake Reed or John Curtis or those guys who you feel have a good chance of getting to the big leagues, even if it's quote unquote just as a reliever, there's value in that. And I might have wanted to see more upside, but there's value. These guys can move, and they could be trade chips, and they could get to the big leagues. So I was excited about that. I mean, I think later on they started taking some more high school types. In fact, they took a guy named McCarthy Tatum from I think high school in California, and I think the 20th round. He seems to have a lot of potential as well, but I think he's more likely to go to college. Late in the draft, they took a few guys with Minnesota connections. Obviously Trey Vavra is getting talked about quite a bit in the 33rd round of first baseman. I think he went to Florida Southern, but he's the son of Joe Vavra, the brother of Tanner Vavra. In round 35, they took a guy named Brad Mathowetz. He's a catcher. I think he's from Matamidi High School, who Jack Morris gave a shout out to the other night on the Twins broadcast. But again, not likely to sign. I want to say Mike Bauman was also a Minnesota kid they took right before that. Blake Schmidt, his attempt to go to the College World Series. He's a shortstop from Maryland, but he's also from Minnesota. He was drafted in the 26th round. Their team was one game away from getting to that College World Series. Onus Farfan is a left-handed pitcher who pitched last year at a Bible college in Wilmer, and he was set to go to the University of Mary. The Twins took him in the 21st round. It'll be interesting to see if he signs or if he goes to the University of Mary in Bismarck. So it'll be interesting to see.
I'm fairly certain that he's either done or will be done soon.
Done with signing?
Yeah.
Okay. And I would expect that.
That's what I've heard. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he'll be one of that signs really quick. The Twins are going to try to get a bunch of guys signed really, really quick, and he was one of the names that I had heard.
Let me give people a little bit of an idea of what's about to happen. The Twins have had guys at extended spring training over the last couple of months. They're having a mini camp that started today down in Fort Myers, and that's the guys that are in extended spring training. And drafted players will begin to start showing up on Wednesday. So I'd expect to see like Nick Gordon will show up on Wednesday. If Roberto Gonzalez does show up, he can show up Wednesday or Thursday. He'll show up one of those days to be sure. And then they're going to start making GCL rosters and the Elizabethton Twins rosters really, really soon. I think I want to say that I heard that the bus for Elizabethton's taking off next week already. So it's going to be a pretty quick mini camp. But it'll be interesting to see how that all comes together. It's always interesting to me that these guys get signed, and a lot of college guys. So you think Elizabethton, but it'll be interesting to see how many of them go to the GCL, or maybe some of them even getting an opportunity to go all the way up to Cedar Rapids to start with once they get started. So. On Monday the bus leaves for Elizabethton, so that's pretty exciting. The other thing I wanted to mention, Jeremy, I don't know if you've heard these yet, but the Twins did have some releases from that extended spring training, guys that won't get a chance to go play in Elizabethton or GCL or even up in Cedar Rapids. One is Hein Rob, the South African. We've heard he's pitched in the WBC for South Africa. I think he spent 5 years in the organization. Javier Pimentel was a guy they signed, a third baseman. They signed 3 years ago. He was supposed to be a good hitting third baseman. He just really never hit. A guy they drafted last year, and I want to say the 16th or 17th round, Tanner Mendonca, was released. And a guy they drafted out of Harvard a couple of years ago, but he had arm problems and injuries a lot of the time, Andrew Ferreira, and I'm sure I said that wrong. Those four were released. Again, obviously not good news for them, but it speaks to how the rosters are so dynamic at this point as the new players are coming into the organization.
Yeah, that's a bummer, but I would expect probably more guys get released too with the amount of pitchers that are on the ESPN auction. One last thing I wanted to say about the draft. In round 13, the Twins drafted a guy named Zach Tillery from the Florida Gulf Coast. And it prompted me to wonder if do you know what question I'm gonna ask?
Yeah, but the answer is no.
You asked too?
No. I didn't ask, but I wouldn't.
But you wouldn't ask?
Yeah. Where are you going with that one, Jeremy?
Well, if you guys are familiar with Byron Buxton has a girlfriend by the last name of Tillery, and my question was if they were related. Not that that's why they would draft the guy, but just if they were related. And the response I get was that no, they don't think he's related to Buxton's girlfriend, but any kind of connection to Buxton, regardless of how distant or non-existent it is a good thing.
Yeah.
And Tillery will get a chance to start Um, he's got a pretty live arm, physical dude, athletic for his size. So um, one that has some upside, even though he's a college character.
Right, and that's just it. I mean, like I said earlier, and I think you agree with, on an individual basis, I have no problem with anyone they drafted in the entire draft, and I'm never gonna have a problem with anyone they draft in the draft because, as you know, they're area scouts and then they're cross checkers, and then Mike Radcliffe. These guys are doing their homework. We see stats and we read a couple of things that the Perfect Game people or the Baseball America people or whoever it is, you know, saw. We don't see them. So for me to pretend I know what was a good pick or not, especially as you're talking about 10th round down, much less, second round down, I'm not going to go there. But, it was just, for me, it was more about, all pitchers, all college guys, things like that. And at the end of the day, if they have any upside, I'm good with it,
Right.
you know?
I mean, I was reminded just by what you just said there of a question I was asked on Twitter on either Saturday morning or Friday night. Um, so at that point, the Twins had drafted Gordon and essentially 9 relief pitchers. And the question I got was what I thought about the Twins draft. And I said, well, I'd like to see what the Twins do today. So it must have been Saturday morning. I'd like to see what the Twins do today. Uh, and then give me like 5 years to get back to you on that one.
Right.
Because there's so much stuff. I mean, the one draft, I think back to really since I started following it closely when the Twins drafted, um, was it Bullock and Tootle? They drafted guys
Sure.
and Matt Bayshore. I liked all those picks as
Yeah.
singularly and collectively. I thought they had a heck of a draft,
Yep.
and it turned out that none of them were worth a crap.
You're right. I mean, Kyle Gibson was the number one pick that year. He had Tommy John surgery. Matt Bayshore was the second pick. He had his second Tommy John surgery and a shoulder surgery, but he was throwing 97 at Indiana. Ben Tootle had shoulder surgery. I think it was his labrum. And Billy Bullock got traded for Scott Diamond, but then he had some arm problems, plus the suspension as well. So I know what do you do? I mean, all you can do is go and follow your best player available philosophy and kind of hope at the end of the day. I do have a question here, and I'm just going to ask this, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, and you've seen it too, from RMD Erickson at Twitter. Do you think Nick Birdie will be in the majors by September? And I mean, we could discuss that longer, but just your gut feel. Do you think he'll be up before September or by September?
No, I don't. If you think of the most aggressive the Twins could possibly be, if he signs, obviously he's heading to Fort Myers after the College World Series, which is going to play into this. Um, if he signs, even if you say he signs by 3 weeks from now, you're looking at the end of June. Uh, if they keep him in Fort Myers, it's July 1st, and you have, 2 months of the minor league season to get all the way up. I don't see it happening. I don't see any way, and I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see it happen. Um, I don't see any way that it does. What do you think?
I don't think so either. And part of me, going back to an earlier part of our conversation, I would I wouldn't mind seeing him ending the season as the closer for the Fort Myers Miracle with Miguel Sano and Byron Buxton and that roster. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing him closing playoff games. But the other part of me is like, I just get really nervous by college pitchers. And I'm not saying he's been overused, and I don't think he has been. He's only thrown like 32 or something innings this year. I just get really nervous doing too much with college pitchers that first year. I wouldn't even have a problem if they did what they typically do with college pitchers and just have him pitch at Elizabethton for 2 weeks and dominate for 2 weeks in a completely relaxed environment, and then move him up to Cedar Rapids and keep him there for a little while and just see how that goes, and just pitch him every fourth day or something. I'd take care of him. That's number one. Get him to the off season, and let him rest the arm a little bit. At the same time, I absolutely think he could pitch in the Twins bullpen right now. I
Right.
don't have any question of that. Here's a comment I kind of jotted down as we were talking earlier about this. I'm pretty high on Zach Jones, even with his injuries this year. Michael Tonkin's a prospect. Tyler Jones, I think, is a good pitching prospect as a reliever. And I think AJ Octor is probably undervalued as a possible big league relief pitcher. The prospect status of Nick Burdi compared to any of those guys is so much higher. Like I know a lot of Twins fans are really high on Michael Tonkin. As it comes to prospect status, there's like night and day. There's little comparison in my mind. Birdie is a prospect. I mean, he is a
Right.
legit, could be a closer who could be a Roldis Chapman. That's the ceiling.
So, where do you put him in your list of Twins prospects?
I'd put him, and I posted on Twitter the other day my top 8, and it's so dynamic. It could change from day to day, or thing I read to thing I read at this point. So I'm going to have to update that more formally sometime soon. I would put him in that category, probably in the 10 to 15 range, because he's a reliever. I think he's going to have a big impact on a big league roster, but because he'll only pitch 50 to 60 innings a year, I always tend to put them a little bit lower. So for me to have him in that 12 to 15 range is saying a lot, because I think I have Tonkin in the mid 20s or something. I think Zach Jones maybe was 22 or something coming into the year. I'd put him in that category with the caveat that means I think pretty highly of him.
Right, and you're talking about a guy that is, I mean, he's a top 10 prospect for probably 85% of the teams in baseball.
I would think so.
He is. I mean, Nick Gordon is probably the number one prospect on a few teams,
Yep.
and the debate here is he six? Is he seven? Is he eight?
Yeah, and I had him 7. I think Cody Christie, who we'll talk to tomorrow night when we're both on the Talk to Contact podcast, I believe. He had him 5. I had him 7, and that was just a quickly doing it. And he, once we start seeing him next year, he could jump up to that 4 category. I mean, he could move up.
Well, he'll have to move up because Myers should be graduated.
Right.
Um, at this point, I think either you said it or you wrote it somewhere or tweeted it about the, you had a hard time or you thought hard about putting Stewart over Meyer.
Right.
And now Barrios is in that same conversation.
Absolutely.
How do you put any of those 3 guys below Nick Gordon? You don't.
I can't.
And I guess that's where I'm at too, because I think for me Gordon and Thorpe are kind of in that. Gordon, Thorpe, and Polanco are kind of in that same category. Rosario is a guy that I wasn't as high on this winter, but now he's doing everything right. How many is that? Is that 10 or 11 guys that I just mentioned? And
Well, yeah, just for me, it's Buxton, Sano, Myers, Stewart, Barrios, and then I go with Rosario at 6. I put Gordon at 7, and who am I missing? Oh, Polanco at 8. And then to me, at that point, you've got Vargas, Santana, Trevor May, Lewis Thorpe, Nick Burdi probably fitting into that same range of 9 through 13. And I'm sure I've missed others. I mean, maybe Gonsalves is in that next category. I mean, there's some guys that won't be in the top 13 or 14 that are really good prospects. Guys like Travis Harrison, who I still believe in. Adam Walker is probably in that 15 range now. But I think Birdie and Gordon are the 2 that fit into a top 30 prospects from the guys that were drafted this year. Would you add Cedar-Roth or any others to that list?
yeah, I would put Cedar-Roth in a top 30 for sure.
Okay.
Uh, the thing is, and I'm not as anti-bullpen guys when I do my prospect rankings. I tend to rank them a little bit higher than you do. Um, Ultimately, I think that's where he ends up, but he's got a chance to be a starter, and I think that needs to be um, considered. Melitakis, I don't think any of us really thought he would stick as a starter. Um, Seagrath, he could. He's got the ability to do it. Throws harder. Um, just thinking numbers wise without looking at it, I think Cedar would probably fit in most organizations, around that 15, maybe 15 to 18 range. With the Twins, I think you're probably looking at something that's more in that 22 to 25 range. Um,
Yeah,
but
and that's fair.
I would be surprised where I would be surprised if he's not in BA's top 30 at the end of the year.
Yeah, and then I'm good with that. I think there's enough upside there. Overall, I think the draft, I was interested. They took like 6 guys with local connections. It'll be interesting to see how many of them they sign. The bullpen guys, how many will get a chance to start? How many will just be dominant? And how quickly can guys move? The surprise, I think, for both of us, again, Gordon going to Elizabethton is what they're saying. Pat Kelly from Nebraska was taken in the 12th round. I think a lot of people think he'll sign. He's a local guy. Tyler Caresa, the guy they took in the 10th or 11th round 4 years ago, just hoping to sign him, but he went to college, ended up transferring. They got him in the 16th round. My favorite name probably is 19th round. They took Jared Poteet. I believe he was a junior college catcher. My favorite thing about him is on Twitter, he's Jared Potweet.
Oh boy.
Yeah, good times. That was pretty fun. So, the other thing, they took not a lot of high school guys, 5 guys that they drafted out of high school from Florida. So, I mean, that's an area they definitely looked at. The 40th round, they took Dalton Guthrie, who is the son of, if you were around during the 91 World Series, Mark Guthrie was a left-handed reliever. Dalton Guthrie is his son. He's a shortstop. So, probably won't sign, but kind of a nice story there.
If you're talking about great names, I believe the Twins' 30th rounder's name is Theo Theophanopoulos.
Yeah, that
So
was a pretty good one too.
that's the winner for me. Um,
Yeah,
but now that we've that we're touching what 145 minutes,
yeah. There's no way anyone's listening to this whole thing?
I don't know. I think tomorrow afternoon E-Rolf will be listening to this
Probably just to know what questions to ask us.
because yeah, otherwise we give him a hard time on his podcast tomorrow night.
Yep.
All
But I
right.
think we do want to encourage people to listen to this on iTunes, but also listen to the Talk to Contact podcast, which will probably be available on Thursday morning, and let them know they do a great job too. So we'll both be on it and tell them to listen to us too.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us tonight on this wonderful evening. Twins win, um, and it's my last day of school tomorrow, so I'm pretty happy about that too.
Woohoo!
I might just pull off an all-nighter. I'm not excited.
That's great.
I won't do that. I'm not that crazy. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Come hang out with us again next Tuesday. See you guys later.